They sold my grandma's house while I was at work. The house where she taught me how to braid lavender, where she whispered, "This will be yours one day, baby." But 1 week after her funeral, it was gone. Sold off no warning, no signature from me, just a silent betrayal with a price tag. My uncle took the money. My cousin threw parties in the backyard like it never mattered. But I didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't fight. I just waited. And when the foreclosure signs went up, I bought the house back without saying a single word. I was 13 the first time Grandma said it. We were sitting on the porch of her weathered little house on East 7th Street in Tucson, Arizona. Her hands smelled like lemon and mint from the tea she always made, and I had just finished brushing out her soft gray hair. "This house," she said, tapping the arm of the rocking chair, "it'll be yours one day. Maya, I want you to have it." I smiled. I didn't really understand the weight of it then. I just knew that house felt like the only place in the world where I could breathe. It wasn't fancy, paint peeling, shutters always crooked, but it was the heartbeat of my childhood. The scent of bread in the oven, the way she hummed old jazz tunes, the creaky floorboard in the hallway that only I knew how to step over. It wasn't just a house, it was her. And somehow me. Years passed. I moved to Flagstaff for college, then Phoenix for work. But every holiday, every birthday, I was there, sitting on that same porch. Her hand always found mine. The last Christmas before she passed, she looked tired, thinner, but her voice still strong. "You're the only one who remembers where the sugar spoons are," she said, laughing. I laughed too, because I actually listen. She squeezed my hand. "That's why it's yours, Maya, no matter what anyone says." I didn't know what she meant then, but I would soon. When she passed, it wasn't sudden, but grief doesn't care about preparation. It hits like a truck. I drove down to Tucson that same day. I brought sunflowers, her favorite, and sat on the porch for hours. The wind felt different without her, quieter, like the house was holding its breath. The funeral was small. She didn't want a big thing, just family and some neighbors. I read a letter I'd written shaking, crying, but I got through it. That night, I slept in her bed. The sheets still smelled like lavender soap. The next morning, I made coffee in her chipped blue kettle. I sat on the porch like always. I thought, this is the start of something new. I was wrong. 3 days later, my Uncle Stephen called. Said there'd be a quick family meeting at his house. I thought it was to go over memories, make plans to honor her wishes. I brought photo albums, a recipe box. But when I walked in, they were already talking numbers. "House sold for $280K, Stephen said, flipping through paperwork. "We split it 3 ways. Simple." I blinked. "What do you mean, sold?" Kyle, his son, leaned back on the couch. "Yeah, you weren't really living there anymore, so..." My voice cracked. "Grandma said it was mine." They looked at each other, then back at me. Stephen shrugged. There was no will. At least, nothing legal. I froze. "She promised me." "She probably said a lot of things," Kyle muttered. That stung. Like a knife to the ribs, quiet, precise. I didn't scream, didn't cry, not there. I picked up my albums and walked out. Back at Grandma's house, I sat on the porch one last time. The wind was still. No birds, no traffic. Just silence. I whispered, "I'll come back, I swear." And that's when the fire inside me started. They could take the papers, the money, but they couldn't take what the house meant. Not to me. I didn't go back to Stephen's house after that day. Not for Christmas. Not for Kyle's baby shower. Not even when they invited me to the family reunion like nothing had happened, like they hadn't gutted the one piece of my past that actually meant something. I saw the photos online, Kyle holding up a beer on the porch that used to be Grandma's, his wife posing near the hydrangea bushes, now trampled. A chalkboard sign hung on the front door that read, "Home Sweet Home." No, that wasn't home. That was theft wrapped in a bow. I wanted to scream. I wanted to knock on the door and ask how it felt to sit on someone else's memories. But I didn't. Instead, I went home to my small one-bedroom apartment in Phoenix. I sat on the floor and opened my laptop. I searched county property records, and there it was in black and white. Transfer of deed from Clara Ellison to Stephen Ellison, notarized by Kyle Ellison. My heart turned to ice. They notarized their own betrayal. The next morning, I called the probate office. explained who I was, told them what my grandmother said, about the porch talks, about the sugar spoons, about the tea, about the promise. The woman on the other end sighed. Unless there's a will or documentation, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. I asked if a will had ever been filed. Nope, she said, nothing on record. I thanked her and hung up, but I wasn't done. I dug through my things, searching for anything Grandma had written, cards, letters, recipes, but none of them said the house was mine, because she trusted her word would be enough. She trusted them. I should have known better. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I got up, grabbed my keys, and drove 3 hours back to Tucson. I parked across the street and stared at the house. There was a new car in the driveway, a for rent sign in the window, and strangers inside. I sat there for an hour, and then I drove away. That's when I made a promise not to fight them their way, but to outlast them, quietly. So I worked nights, weekends, holidays. I freelanced and Ubered and sold custom embroidery on Etsy. I clipped coupons, packed lunches, skipped drinks with friends. I did everything I could to save. Meanwhile, the house passed from hand to hand. A new landlord bought it, a man named Mr. Harlan. I read up on him. He ran a dozen low-end rentals across the city, known for cutting corners, avoiding repairs. Tenants came and went, complaints filed, grass overgrown, neighbors whispered. One night, a small electrical fire started in the kitchen. The tenant moved out. Still, I waited. I visited sometimes, just to see it. I'd park at the end of the block and look at the chipped shutters, the cracked walkway, the porch now sagging under neglect. It looked tired, sad. And then, one Thursday night, while checking my alerts, I saw it. Notice of trustee sale, 182 East 7th Street. I read the document 5 times. Unpaid mortgage, property taxes delinquent, auction scheduled in 31 days. The air left my lungs. I wasn't just watching anymore. This was my chance. I didn't tell anyone, not my coworkers, not my friends, not even my therapist. This wasn't about explaining. This was about reclaiming. I started preparing. I pulled up auction guidelines, downloaded state foreclosure laws. I printed every document I could find. I joined forums under a fake name to ask questions. I practiced bidding aloud, set a limit, opened a new bank account just for the funds, cashed out an old savings bond my grandma had once given me as a child. Every dollar I could gather, I gathered. I watched videos of auctions, saw how people bid, how they hesitated, how hesitation cost them. I wouldn't hesitate. I printed a photo of Grandma, one where she was sitting on that very porch, laughing, a glass of sweet tea in her hand. I tucked it into my wallet. The day before the auction, I drove back to Tucson and sat outside the house. I walked up to the edge of the lawn, now more weeds than grass. My fingers grazed the old mailbox. "I'm coming," I whispered. I closed my eyes and pictured her laugh, her voice, the way she used to say, "You're the strong one. Maya. You always were." And she was right. I went back to my hotel, ironed my black slacks, laid out my sweater, packed my documents, reviewed my notes one last time. I barely slept. In the morning, I left before sunrise. I sat in my car outside the county courthouse for 15 minutes, hands shaking, heart pounding. Then I went in. I signed my name on the bidder list, got my number, sat near the back. There were maybe 20 other people there, some chatting, some confident, some bored. Me, I was fire-wrapped in stillness. When they called the property address, my grandmother's address, I straightened my spine. The starting bid was low. A man in a leather jacket raised his hand. Another woman chimed in. I waited. Let them show their cards. Then I raised my number. 95,000? A hush fell. The woman hesitated. The man glanced at his phone. Another bid, $97,000. I responded instantly. 99. A long pause. Then nothing. So the auctioneer called? Just like that. My chest filled with something too big to name. The house was mine again. No screaming, no legal war, just patience, strategy, and silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than any scream. I picked up one of the loose porch boards and turned it in my hands. The wood was splintered, but familiar. I remembered sitting there with Grandma on warm evenings, shelling peas or snapping green beans. She used to hum low and quiet, and I would try to match her tune. I remembered the time she let me paint a birdhouse, and I spilled blue paint on the porch floor. I cried, thinking I'd ruined it, but she just laughed and said, "Now it's got your mark. That's how we know it's yours." That spot was still there, faded, but waiting. In the weeks ahead, I would start repairs, hire a roofer, call in a plumber, pull weeds, patch paint, but I wouldn't flip it. I wouldn't rent it. I would live in it. I'd fill it with the scent of lemon tea and cinnamon bread again. I'd hang her wind chimes back in the corner, where they belonged. I'd rock in her chair on the porch, just like she did. And maybe someday I'd teach someone else how to shell peas on that same step. But for now, I just sat in the silence. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I was home, the day the auction date was announced. I sat in my car and stared at the notice for a full hour. It was happening. All the silence, all the saving, all the watching it led to this. Grandma's house was going up for public auction, and no one in my family knew I was coming for it. I worked overtime that week, picked up 2 extra shifts at the restaurant, tutored a high school student in algebra for 3 hours, even though math makes my eye twitch. Every dollar mattered. I withdrew all my savings into a cashier's check, triple-checked the name, and kept it in a fireproof folder under my bed like it was sacred. On the night before the auction, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment floor, mumbling numbers, dates, the parcel ID of the property like a prayer. I packed my documents 3 times. By dawn, I was already in the car headed south to Tucson. The sun hadn't even come up yet. The air was cool, but my palms were sweating. I kept imagining everything that could go wrong. What if someone bid higher? What if the paperwork wasn't accepted? What if they recognized me? I kept driving. By 8, I stood on the courthouse steps. I wore black from head to toe, hair tied back, no makeup, just a bidder's badge and a folder pressed to my chest. The auction room was smaller than I expected. Fluorescent lights, folding chairs, a laminated sign with rules: all bids final, no refunds, payment due by close of business. I took a seat near the back. My heart wouldn't stop pounding. Other bidders trickled in. A guy in loafers scrolling Zillow, a woman with a Bluetooth headset, an older man sipping gas station coffee and reading foreclosure spreadsheets. To them, this was business. To me, it was blood. At 9:03 a.m., the auctioneer began. They read parcel numbers in a monotone voice. Properties flew by like pages in a cheap catalog. Then they called it, "Next item, parcel 182067110, East 7th Street. Starting bid $86,000. I held my breath. One bidder raised their hand, then another. It climbed fast. $88,000. $89,500. $90,000. I waited. $91,000, I said, my voice calm but clear. Heads turned briefly. The room took notice. Another raised $93,000. I answered 95. Pause. 97. Someone challenged. I didn't blink. 99. That stopped them. The auctioneer looked around. Any other bids? Silence. The gavel came down. Sold. Parcel 182067110. $99,000 to bidder 113. That was me. I exhaled for the first time in minutes. It was done. I signed the paperwork, paid in full, collected the receipt, walked out into the sun with a deed in my hand and fire in my lungs. Then, like fate laughing in real time, I saw Kyle across the street, leaning on his truck, scrolling his phone. He looked up. Our eyes met. At first, he squinted like he couldn't quite place me. Then realization dawned. I didn't wave, didn't speak. I just walked right past him, let him choke on the silence. Later that evening, I drove back to the house, my house. I parked in the gravel driveway. The grass had turned to brittle straw. The porch sagged. The mailbox was cracked. But it was mine. I climbed the steps slowly, touched the doorknob, and smiled. It still stuck the same way it used to. The sun was setting. That same orange-pink glow I remembered as a child bathed the house in warmth. I didn't go inside. Not yet. I sat on the porch instead, and I cried. Not out of sadness. Out of relief. Out of victory. Out of the quiet kind of justice that doesn't need applause. I thought about Grandma. The stories she told. The pies she baked. The night she let me stay up past midnight just to watch shooting stars from the porch swing. I could still hear her voice. This house is yours. Maya, you take care of it, and it'll take care of you. And now I finally could. In the weeks that followed, I started repairs. I fixed the screen door, repainted the shutters, called in a plumber to look at the pipes, a roofer to patch the leaks. I pulled weeds with my bare hands, dug up the garden beds and planted fresh lavender, just like she had. Neighbors stopped by, curious. Some remembered me. Others introduced themselves. One even brought cookies. They asked if I was new. No, I said, just home again. There was power in saying that. More than they could ever know. One afternoon, I got a message on Facebook. It was from Steven. No greeting. Just a line, heard you bought the place. I didn't respond. A week later, another came. Kyle wants to come by and grab a few things from the shed. Old tools, mostly. I stared at the screen. Then typed no and blocked him. I owed them nothing. This house wasn't theirs. It never was. They took it by ink and trickery. I took it back with silence. And silence, in the end, was louder. The papers were signed. The deed was in my name. But something inside me still couldn't believe it. Maybe because they never did. Not once. No one in my family had ever looked at me and thought she could do this. She could win. They called me emotional, overly sensitive, said I held on to things too tightly. They were right about one thing I did hold on. To my grandmother's words, to her memory, to the truth, and I held on long enough to take it all back. The week after the auction, my phone didn't ring. No apologies, no explanations. Just silence. I liked it that way. But then, word got out. Kyle showed up the following Saturday, drove past twice, parked on the curb, then walked up like he owned the sidewalk, like he still had a place in this story. I didn't open the door. I watched him through the peephole as he stood there, pretending to look casual, pretending it didn't matter, pretending like he wasn't here because something deep inside him was rattled. He stood there for 5 minutes, then left. The next day, I got a letter in the mailbox, handwritten, from Stephen. Maya, we didn't mean for things to go down like this. It got complicated. We all loved your grandmother. You know that. Kyle's just been under a lot of stress. He didn't mean to hurt you. He included his number, and a smiley face. A smiley face. I put the letter through the shredder. This wasn't about an apology. This was about what they took. And what I took back? Still, the house wasn't whole. The foundation was cracked, the drywall peeling, the floors warped. But I didn't mind. I didn't want perfection. I wanted the truth. And the truth was in every flaw. I called a contractor to inspect the structural issues, booked roofers to replace the rotted beams, hired a landscaper to remove the overgrowth strangling the yard. It cost me nearly everything I had left, but every bill was worth it, because every fix felt like a stitch closing a wound. Neighbors started waving again. The little boy from across the street, Jace, began riding his bike past my driveway, slowing down to peek at the tools and paint buckets. One afternoon, I asked if he wanted to help me paint the garden fence. He grinned like I gave him the moon. We painted half of it sunflower yellow before the brush slipped out of his hand and splattered paint across the grass. He looked horrified, but I just laughed. You know what Grandma Clara would have said, I asked. He shook his head. She'd say, now it's got your mark. That's how we know it's yours. He smiled wide, and I felt something in my chest loosen. The house was coming back to life. One nail, one laugh, one quiet act of restoration at a time. But healing doesn't erase memory. One evening, I found a box buried behind the hallway closet. Old photos, receipts, envelopes with Grandma's handwriting, and then a small notebook. Inside were her lists, phone numbers, birthdays, grocery staples, and a page titled, For Maya, When the Time Comes. My hands trembled as I turned the page. I know how this family can be. I tried to talk to Stephen, but he always thought he knew better. I hope this house finds its way to you, baby girl. I didn't get the will filed like I planned, but I trust you'll find your way back. I read it 3 times, then cried for the 4th. She knew. Even then she knew. I framed that page, hung it by the kitchen window, not as proof, but as a promise. The next week, a lawyer called me, said someone in the family had tried to challenge the title. I asked who. They hesitated. Your uncle's legal representative. but there's no merit to it. Just a scare tactic. I laughed. He's going to learn, I said, that I don't scare easily. The lawyer chuckled, so I gathered. I hung up and stood in the middle of the living room, now painted warm cream and smelling of fresh pine. I was done playing quiet. I posted a photo on Facebook. Me, standing on the porch, holding the deed. Caption, some inherit houses, some steal them. I just bought mine back. The comments exploded. Some cousins tried to pretend they'd been on my side all along. Some stayed silent. Kyle didn't comment, but I saw he viewed it. Good. Let them see. Let them sit with it. Let them learn that silence doesn't mean surrender. It means strategy. And my strategy had worked. Not by chance, but by choice. By holding back when I wanted to scream. By showing up when they thought I'd disappear. And by letting go of everything except my grandmother's voice. I still hear her sometimes, in the wind through the porch rails. You did good, Maybug. And I whisper back, I'm not done yet. 6 months have passed since I bought the house. It still doesn't feel real sometimes. I wake up and hear the creak of the old floorboards. See the morning sun spilling through the kitchen window. And for a second, I think I'm 13 again. Back when Grandma would be making biscuits and humming to the radio. But this time, it's me at the stove. The house smells like lemon oil and paint now. Fresh walls, fixed pipes, new insulation. But I kept the bones. I kept the character. I kept the soul. Every week, I tackle something new. One weekend, I patched the porch rails. The next, I dug out the overgrown flower beds. Lavender's already coming back. Some neighbors stopped by. One older woman brought peach cobbler and said, Your grandma would be proud. Honey, that meant more than she probably realized. I don't bring up what happened. No one really asks. The people who know. The house had been falling apart, neglected and forgotten, like me, in some ways. Now we're rebuilding each other. Inside. I hung some of Grandma's framed cross stitches. The one that says love grows here is right above the fireplace. I found it in a storage box under the stairs. Somehow, it survived everything. Sometimes, I wonder if she knew this would happen. If she knew her children wouldn't honor her word. If she suspected that I'd be the one to come back, long after the others stopped visiting. Maybe that's why she always looked at me the way she did, like she was planting something. And now I see what it was. I still haven't responded to Stephen's letter. He sent it a month ago, written in careful cursive, full of we didn't mean to hurt you, and it got complicated. He said Kyle felt bad. He said they thought they were doing what was best for the family. He asked if they could visit the house, just to see it one more time. I never wrote back. Because the truth is what they really want isn't the house. They want closure without accountability. They want comfort, not consequences. But this house, this place, it's not a symbol for them to rewrite. It's where I learned to stand my ground. It's where I lost everything and chose to rebuild anyway. It's mine. Not just because I bought it, because I showed up when no one else did. And because I stayed. Last week, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sky turn gold. I looked at the mailbox repainted and straight again and remembered the first letter Grandma ever helped me send. It was to a pen pal. I was 7. She made me rewrite it 3 times until the spelling was perfect. Anything worth saying, she said, is worth saying right. I think about that a lot now. What I would say to her, what she'd say to me. Maybe she'd be quiet at first. Maybe she'd just sit beside me. Then she'd squeeze my hand and say, I always knew you'd come back. And I would say, thank you for trusting me. And that would be enough. The photo I posted after the auction is still up. Me, standing on the porch, holding the deed, captioned with some inherit, some steal. I reclaimed. I didn't mean for it to get attention, but it did. Old classmates messaged me. Strangers commented. Some praised me. Others asked for advice. A few, including distant cousins, sent angry emojis or passive-aggressive comments. I didn't reply. The victory didn't need defending. It just needed living. Now, every time I unlock the door, I remind myself what this really was. Not revenge. Restoration. I didn't win in court. I didn't expose anyone online. I just waited for the moment when truth had a price tag and I paid it. Not because I wanted to prove a point, but because I wanted peace. One afternoon, I opened the shed out back and found an old wooden crate. Inside were gardening gloves, rusted tools, a pair of grandma's boots, and a notebook wrapped in a faded bandana. I opened it slowly. Inside planting schedules, soil notes, scribbled recipes, and one page folded twice, stuck near the back. For Maya, when you're ready. My chest tightened. I read slowly. They may forget what matters. They may turn away from what's true, but I believe you will remember. And if you do come back to this place, make it whole again, and let it grow. I sat in the shed for a long time. No tears, just stillness, just awe. She knew. She trusted. She gave me a map written in faith. I placed that page in a frame and set it above the kitchen counter. Now, every morning when I reach for the coffee, I see it. And I remember what it cost to return. This house will never be just a house again. It's proof. Proof that quiet isn't weakness. That patience isn't passivity. That roots, once planted deep enough, can't be pulled out not by neglect, not by greed, not by anything. A few nights ago, I saw Kyle's truck drive slowly past the house. He didn't stop. He didn't wave. And I didn't move. I let him see what healing looks like. What dignity looks like. What it means to come home with your head high and your hands steady. Not to gloat, but to honor something sacred. Today I pruned the rose bushes. Tomorrow I'll paint the hallway. There's always more to do, but that's the beauty of it. A home doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be true. And this one finally is.